Hello. We are live, hopefully. I'm gonna go with yes. It looks like I'm live from this perspective. How are we all feeling? How are we all doing? Of course, headed into Hungary, the final race before the summer break. It feels weird that the summer break is already upon us, but it is where it is. Trying to find the race. Hello, hello. How are we doing? Antonio is in there. Sally's in there as well. How are we doing? Hello, Liam. Hello, Abar. Wow. Let's get into it, shall we? Straight into the Hungarian Grand Prix. I feel like this is the crescendo, right? I know I've been saying it for a very long time. And I know that I've wanted a little bit of side-by-side action for Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri throughout the season so far. I thought we were going to get it in Belgium. Thought we were going to get it in Silverstone as well. Hasn't quite gone that way yet. But surely this is the one, right? It's a year on from where we saw the team orders that gave Oscar Piastri his first win. A lot of people thought an undeserved first win, considering how quick Lando Norris was that weekend. A year later, we're back here again. They're fighting for the championship. There is going to be no love lost between them, considering how the Constructors' Championship is effectively locked in. Like, that was one thing that they were keeping in mind last year. You've got to remember the McLaren team were chasing down Red Bull and fighting pretty tooth and nail with Ferrari for the Constructors' Championship. That is not the case this year. So it is all down to the drivers. And it is going to be a very tight battle between the two of them. How are we all feeling? My prediction, Lando, Oscar collision. Charles wins. Lewis podium. Lewis all the way from Q2. Okay. Hope it ain't going to be jinxing it, but I've got an itch. This will be a banger today. Me too. Me too. I've got a feeling. It just feels right. It feels written, you know, a year on. The papaya rules became such a thing after that battle as well. And going into the Netherlands and Monza, where we also had little contentious bits and pieces between the two McLaren drivers, it feels like it's about to heat up, right? We're getting into that second half of the season. We're getting into the final races where championships are won from this point forwards. Of course, you can't lose, or you certainly can lose a championship in the first half of the year, but this is where the championships are won. This is where it really matters. This is crunch time now when we get to those 10 Grand Prix post-summer break. And this is the chance to carry a bit of momentum into that, right? A chance to put yourself in a position where you are the torchbearer, you are the hunter or the hunted. And this is the chance for Lando and Oscar to battle their way to the top. How are we feeling? Good map. Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate it. Yeah, the Hungaroring is nice. It fits nicely in the space, which is quite nice. The other maps, some of them, like Saudi Arabia, that track map is ridiculous. It's basically just a straight line up and to the right and then back down to the left. So it gives me nothing. Can we have a Charles Leclerc win, please? I think it's certainly on the cards. It's particularly difficult to overtake around the Hungaroring. It's just, does that Ferrari have the race pace to deal with the two McLaren cars behind? Shall we first and foremost look at your guys' predictions? So every single week we do a predictions. I think 200 people got their votes in for this week's predictions. And I went through them just after qualifying yesterday. So unfortunately you can't get them in. They are available every single race week though. Check the community tab on the Monday of the race week. You can get your predictions in for the Grand Prix ahead of it. And this is what you guys predicted. Some of it's looking pretty good. Some of it's looking pretty bad. I'm going to be honest with you. You predicted Oscar Piastri to win the Grand Prix once again. I feel like that's certainly on the cards, isn't it? He's been tremendously quick throughout this year so far, leading the Drivers' Championship for a reason. You've got Lando Norris on the podium in second spot. Max Verstappen was again your pick for third. And I feel like the majority of races, I'd have agreed with you, but this weekend has been an absolute horror show for the Red Bull team, and Max Verstappen starting in 8th place. I'm not sure he is going to be able to get right up into third spot, seeing as the Red Bull's just really not got the pace this weekend, even in the hands of Max Verstappen. That's when you know it's really bad, right? Like, if the Red Bull's not quick in his teammates' hands, it's like, oh, well, Max Verstappen's done something special. When Max Verstappen is also struggling, you know that it's not quite there for him. Love that the surprise was Charles Leclerc, by the way. That is an absolute dream pick. I feel like, particularly surprise and struggle, it was very, very close between quite a lot of drivers. As I say, over 200 people voted, and there was only point something of a percentage through between 3 or 4 drivers, to be honest. I think with the field being so tight and actually so unpredictable, particularly the midfield this year, it's been quite hard to pick out who's likely to be the surprise package and who's likely to struggle, because it does just change every single weekend. But picking out Charles Leclerc, who's starting from pole position, even surprised himself to get that pole position, is certainly a good pick from you guys. Best team, I feel like it's just McLaren locked in all day, every single day. Again, they are starting the highest rated constructor. They are likely to get the most points of any constructor this weekend. Can't really do much better than that. Lewis Hamilton, I feel like this is a ripple from the fact that the Spa Grand Prix weekend was so bad for Lewis Hamilton last time around that it's kind of spilled into Hungary a little bit. And actually, that prediction has also spilled into reality, because we have Lewis Hamilton starting outside of the point scoring places once again, and with a real ordeal on his hands to try and get up into the points. He did a very, very good job of it in Spa. Like, you have to say that first stint on the intermediate tyres was absolutely electric from Lewis Hamilton. Don't know if he's going to get exactly the same luck today. Feels like it's going to be a dry race throughout. 22.1 degrees Celsius currently at the Hungaroring, and therefore I just can't see an opening for Lewis Hamilton. He's going to have to really go for it and do something a little bit special on the strategy if he is going to not be in that struggle category when we get to the end of the Grand Prix. Certainly sits there right now in terms of qualifying yesterday, and then the poorest shout of the weekend, again, I feel like is a little bit of a ripple from Spa. Aston Martin being your flop team of the weekend. They look like they could have a huge points haul on their hands if they finish where they are starting, and that could completely change the complexion of how the Constructors' Championship looks as well. So I feel like flop team Aston Martin might be the poorest choice there, alongside maybe Verstappen on the podium. But generally speaking, gonna give it to you once again, you guys. Your predictions are not too shabby at all. I like what you are thinking. If I was in F1, what number would I choose as my jersey? I would choose 14, but Fernando Alonso unfortunately has that locked in. So I'd have to go for something different, unless I join the grid a couple of years after Fernando Alonso finally retires. So maybe if I join the grid in 2029, because I think Alonso's contract finishes in 2026, so he'd be out 2027, 2028. So if I joined as a rookie for the 2029 season, I would be able to grab that number 14. But until then, I'd have to pick something different. Aston Martin could be the dark horse today, most certain. I don't even know if you can call it dark horse when they're starting as the second best constructor. You know, in terms of the Constructors' Championship, right now they would be scoring the second most points of any team behind the McLaren setup. So don't know if you can call that a dark horse. They certainly had an incredible qualifying yesterday, which has put themselves in a really, really strong position. Just a quick reminder of the compounds that are at play. The C3 and C4 hard and medium compound tyre most likely to be seen in the race, unless somebody goes real out there and goes for a soft compound tyre. We've seen it happen. It could certainly do it, but not sure at this time around. 70 laps of the Hungaroring ahead of us. Is a pretty heavy tyre degradation circuit. Not the worst in the world, but need a lot of downforce. It's twisty, it's difficult. And as we saw yesterday, just a change in wind can completely change the complexion of who has pace and who doesn't. So certainly one to keep your eye on, even if it is pretty tricky to overtake here. The strategy is going to be key, and knowing when and how to go onto those different compounds of tyres could be the real turning point for a lot of the drivers this weekend. In terms of the Drivers' Championship, Lando Norris is just behind his teammate Oscar Piastri, 16 points between them. That is the gap that Lando Norris needs to overturn if he is to go into the summer break ahead of his teammate. It's going to be a tough ask. Would mean finishing sort of second place and Oscar Piastri finishing outside of the points. So unlikely, but that gap, will it elongate or will it become just that little bit smaller for Lando Norris going into the halftime break? Then we have Max Verstappen, George Russell just behind, again, sort of continuing to deliver the maximum out of their cars, even if the maximum out of their cars isn't as we would hope to be as competitive as maybe they would expect it to be. Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton just behind in 5th and 6th as well. Kimi Antonelli still inside of the top 7 with Alex Albon behind as best of the rest, but Alex Albon just 9 points away. Unlikely to sort of change that gap this weekend, but 9 points is certainly doable for Alex Albon. If he were to finish ahead of not just a Red Bull but also a Mercedes this season, that would be a stunning return from Alex Albon and the Williams team. Nico Hülkenberg and Esteban Ocon 9th and 10th, Isaac Hadjar in 11th place, Pierre Gasly a couple of points behind in 12th, actually on equal points with Lance Stroll in 13th. Then we have the 16 club, 14th place Lawson, 15th place Alonso and 16th place Carlos Sainz, all on 16 points. So just a good finish from one of those drivers would move them up considerably in the championship table. So Yuki Tsunoda down in 17th place, still only 10 points on the board and unlikely to add to that this weekend. Yuki Tsunoda, Ollie Behrman on 8 points, but has finished 11th in 4 Grand Prix in a row. He's not finished 4th. He would have more than 8 points on the board. But Ollie Behrman, having finished 11th 4 times in a row, surely this time is the time, right? He's not going to make it 5 times in a row. It's not like he's maybe starting from 11th place. And Gabriel Bortoleto, also only a couple of points behind Behrman now, could have the opportunity to jump up into 18th spot, maybe even beyond, with a good finish here. Why does it feel like an Alonso podium is actually possible? Because it most certainly is possible. I think just realized it rained, so the track would be very green. Yeah, it did rain over the night. What am I looking for? The evening, the morning. That's the word I'm looking for. It rained this morning in Hungary. So yes, the track is going to be a little bit green for the drivers out there, but as we saw yesterday in qualifying, it does rubber in very, very quickly indeed. As I talked about right at the top of the show, the McLaren drivers unlikely to be caught in the Constructors' Championship. It is looking like a complete clean sweep for them in terms of Drivers' Championship and Constructors. It's just which driver ends up with that. And I feel like this is the weekend where they really can now just completely forget about the Constructors' Championship. You know, you could argue they could have done that a few Grand Prix ago, but now, realistically, I don't even think Ferrari are going to get 500 points, let alone 516. So however many more points McLaren get this season as a constructor is completely pointless. It's just all about the Drivers' Championship for those two. Ferrari and Mercedes will have one eye on each other, though. Kimi Antonelli's drop in form has meant that Ferrari have been able to overtake them in the Constructors. Red Bull also drop into 4th place. And that's the interesting one, right? As I said, Aston Martin starting from where they are, 18 points on the board for them if they just finish where they're starting today. Easier said than done, of course, but that would then lift them up into 6th place in the Constructors. So the midfield pack is so incredibly competitive at this point in the season. There are so few points between them, particularly from Stake down to Haas, that can change on a dime. Like one good Grand Prix can completely elevate you from bottom of the pack to midfield in 6th place straight away. Thank you to a few of the additional follows over on Twitch. Massively appreciate that if you are joining us over on the Twitch chat. And also, very, very thankful for all the subscriptions over on YouTube. We're getting towards 130,000 subscribers. We might even be able to hit 130,000 subscribers during this stream. How many subscribers are we on? Shall I have a look? We are on 129,497. So we need 503 subscribers throughout this Grand Prix. That's actually a pretty tricky task I've set for you there, but 500 subscribers, 500 likes would be amazing. 500 subscribers would be absolutely obscene, but we'll have to wait and see how it goes. Maybe we'll get a red flag and elongate the stream by a considerable margin, but appreciate all of the support. Shall we get into qualifying then? As we do head into the 10-minute rundown, we have seen the national anthem now. So we are 13 minutes away from lights out, and a quick 10-minute rundown of the grid as we have it. It was an incredible qualifying session yesterday. If you didn't watch qualifying yesterday, you really missed a treat. And I know it seems a little bit silly to go back and watch a qualifying session after the Grand Prix, but I actually think it might be worth it because it really caught me off guard how competitive and how close it was to all of those cars. Just sort of even Q1, Q2, so competitive, who was going to make it through and who didn't. Then the fight for pole position, which completely turned on its head as we went into Q3 due to the changing conditions. It was ridiculous. There was only half a tenth of a second separating the top four and only just over a tenth of a second separating the top six, which includes 2 Aston Martin cars. It was one of the best qualifying sessions that we have had throughout the entire season so far. Charles Leclerc, though, starting on pole position, managed to master the conditions. He even said he surprised himself with the pace that he was able to find inside of that Ferrari car, and I think that shows you how sort of crazy it was to see Charles Leclerc at the top of the standings at the end of the session, but he managed to do it, and it's very Charles Leclerc-esque, isn't it? That he does just deliver when he needs to, and he's able to secure those pole positions even when they seem like they're not available to him. It's his 27th pole position in Formula One, and it seems criminal that he hasn't been able to turn more of those pole positions into victories inside of that Ferrari car, but I think that's just the thing, right? He has that ability to just take half an opportunity. He gets one little glimpse at the possibility of going to get pole position. He always manages to nab it. And especially yesterday, where I feel like it was a real test of the adaptability of the drivers inside of the car. Because as I say, the conditions in Q2 versus the conditions in Q3 were almost light and day. And the balance that all of the cars had really tested. Okay, you've got 2 laps in Q3. How good are you at adapting to the new scenario inside of just 2 flying laps? And Charles Leclerc just has that raw pace inside of any car that you put him in and has that ability to just nail the conditions, whatever they are. Like, I think if you took all 20 drivers and you just put them into a random car and they had to set a qualifying lap, they got one opportunity to do so, Charles Leclerc would be by far and away the driver that you would expect to get pole position. He just always has a way of finding that pace when he needs it. The McLaren's then just behind in 2nd and 3rd place. Piastri does have the advantage on Lando Norris for now. Q2 into Q3, though, as I say, they were worlds apart from one another. The Q2 laps from Piastri and Norris were actually quicker than the Q3 laps by a considerable margin. I think it was Lance Stroll's Q2 time would have been good enough to get pole position. So that's how much it kind of changed between Q2 and Q3. Couple attempts on everyone in Q2 then turned into a real battle with Leclerc and Russell and the Aston Martins behind to find their positions. Like Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri could have ended up 6th place, and it would have been reasonable in terms of the pace that they actually had and the ability for those other drivers to adapt. And that's why I feel like today, even though I feel like the McLarens will be able to get in front of Charles Leclerc, and I have a feeling that they will still be battling for the victory, I'm not giving up on Charles Leclerc winning this Grand Prix, and I'm not giving up on George Russell being in contention for a possibility of a podium finish or maybe even a victory here in Hungary, because if the track changes and the track develops between 2 sessions, how long was there between Q2 and Q3? Maybe 2-3 minutes, no, 2-3 minutes whilst they did the yellow flag, and then the additional sort of 5-minute gap that we normally have. That was how quickly it changed and how quickly the lap times changed for those cars as well. So I feel like they will take advantage of the fact that they've got the overall better race pace. I feel like when it comes to the pit stops also, they'll be able to get the advantage on the two sort of in the mix with them in Leclerc and Russell, but certainly not a given, especially because a few people are saying, is this now the time that we see the two McLaren cars really clash together and possibly hit some wheels into one another as we go into this weekend? George Russell also showed why he was called Mr. Saturday previously. Absolutely stunning drive from him once again, like half a tenth off pole position. If you told him he was going to be half a tenth off pole position, I think he'd have been like, great, I love starting from the front row of the grid. And then he's starting from fourth. Like, that is how competitive it was and how ridiculously close it was between the two. That final sector was a little bit of his downfall, but I think the straight line speed of that Mercedes car, I want to say fourth place is pretty much locked in for George Russell. It's just whether he can finish any higher than fourth in any way. So, I don't know. Maybe we get that up there, and I want to say that George Russell can battle for the win here, but I don't know if I believe in that myself. I don't want to just lie to the people in front of me, but I have a feeling that Mercedes car might just come good. It does just come good sometimes, doesn't it, that Mercedes car? You look at Canada, nobody would have expected it, but George Russell went on to win that Grand Prix. And I know he wasn't quite there in terms of qualifying yesterday, but he was only half a tenth off. And it's like, oh, can we do it with George Russell? Can we really commit to him getting pole position? Getting the victory here in Hungary? We have to talk about the Aston Martins. Alonso and Stroll, stunning from the Aston Martins. I don't know what's clicked, but something has clicked, and they need to actually analyze the data and realize what they've done right, because it's going to go back, isn't it? We're going to get into the Netherlands and Aston Martin are going to be last again, because that's how their season goes. They have races where they absolutely fly. Alonso and Stroll both clicked with the car yesterday and looked phenomenally quick, but they were the slowest car in Spa by a considerable margin. It's just so back and forth. It's a tennis match between the good and the bad of Aston Martin. They never seem to be in the middle. They are at the peaks and the troughs of the grid, aren't they? They never really level out over the course of a season, but 18 points up for grabs for them right now. 5th place for Fernando Alonso, 6th place for Lance Stroll would be good enough for them to jump up into 6th in the Constructors' Championship. Of course, that is dependent on their race pace, which has been fairly questionable recently, but I suppose if they just kind of let the 4 drivers ahead of them disappear, and then Alonso and Stroll just create the Aston Martin wall, like they can almost play the Monaco kind of game where the 2 of them together can hopefully build up just enough momentum and a little bit of a gap to the likes of Bortoleto, Verstappen, Hamilton behind, that actually I don't think 5th and 6th place is completely untoward for the Aston Martins. Like, they could most certainly get the benefit of starting there, and the fact that the Hungaroring is quite a tricky place to overtake. Gabriel Bortoleto starts in 7th place ahead of the 4-time world champion Max Verstappen. It was a brilliant lap once again from Gabriel Bortoleto, and I feel like I'm saying that more often than not now. He was, what, 3 tenths off pole position, 3.5 tenths off pole position yesterday, and he just seems to be getting better and better when it comes to qualifying. I know that Nico Hülkenberg is still getting the points in the bag, but actually, if you look at where Nico Hülkenberg is scoring those points from, you know, Austria, he got it into the points, but he was outside of it when it came to qualifying. That was a Q1 exit. Silverstone, he managed to get onto the podium, did Nico Hülkenberg, but again, started from Q1 kind of positionings. What was it, 17th, 18th, something like that? I suppose that shows Nico Hülkenberg's quality when it comes to race day and the experience that he has on getting those tyres to the end and being able to deliver. But it also goes to show that once Gabby gets that consistency coming through, and reminds me a little bit of Oscar Piastri in his first season, where we had those shining lights, particularly on qualifying day, where Piastri would just turn up and be electric. If you can then start to turn that into race pace, and you get that tyre management starting to get underneath you as well. Gabriel Bortoleto, I know that he's Formula 3 champion, Formula 2 champion, and it shouldn't seem so ridiculous to say that he feels like a future Formula 1 world champion. But at this point, he is really starting to grab my attention, and he is really starting to make me believe, you know, if that Steak Sauber team soon to be Audi, if Audi can deliver a championship worthy car, not necessarily in 2026, but maybe in 2028, 2030, when we've got slight regulation changes there as well. If Audi are, you know, going to come in, be a big team and deliver a really competitive car, Gabriel Bortoleto could certainly go on to win a world championship. Am I saying that too early? Possibly. But Max Verstappen just behind in 8th place. A horror weekend for him. Delivered when he needed to once again, as Max Verstappen does, and still starting inside of the point scoring places, but nowhere near where he wants to be. And I know, you know, he's staying at Red Bull for next season. I've got a video about that coming out because I think there's a little bit more to the fact that he's staying with Red Bull for 2026 than he's really letting on. But still the fastest Red Bull powered car. At least he can take that advantage, and maybe, just maybe, Max Verstappen can do something from 8th place in terms of race pace. But it's going to be a tough race for Max Verstappen. And then the final two drivers inside of the point scoring places, Liam Lawson and Isaac Hadjar, both through to Q3 again. Really solid in terms of their qualifying yesterday. I think both of them were a little annoyed though. Lawson wanted a little bit more. Isaac Hadjar was clearly upset that he only got one run in that final Q3 session. And I think they knew they should really be ahead of Gabriel Bortoleto there. Like, Bortoleto, even as much as I've just praised him, that Steak Sauber car is not as good as the RB, and therefore I think Lawson and Hadjar knew that that was an opportunity to get up ahead of Gabriel Bortoleto. But starting from 9th and 10th place, maybe we'll get a little bit of a battle, the two of them working against Gabriel Bortoleto ahead, and whether or not they can take advantage of the fact that they've got that team cohesiveness behind. Q2 exits that were notable. Ollie Behrman starting in 11th place. He just absolutely loves 11th. He will finish 11th once again. It will be his 5th 11th place finish in a row, and we'll continue to talk about how Ollie Behrman is doing a lot better than the Drivers' Championship really gives him credit for. Lewis Hamilton just behind, blaming himself, really upset inside of that Ferrari car. Obviously had the positives of Spa in terms of the race pace, but still in qualifying, can't quite get it there yet. And Hamilton really going back to the drawing board over the summer break, it feels like. And then Kimi Antonelli, a notable one in there as well. I know his lap time was deleted, but he was still 5/10 off George Russell's lap time, and he just really needs the summer break at this point. Does Kimi Antonelli? Like, his really solid start to the season, I know, has coincided with the fact that the Mercedes car has also fallen away a little bit, but he has also fallen quite dramatically far from where we were considering him to be towards the beginning. Colapinto needs a little bit of praise on him. I think that's a very solid lap from him, and actually has had the better of the Alpine car throughout the weekend compared to Pierre Gasly, which does need to be praised because Pierre Gasly is certainly not an easy driver to outdo. And Carlos Sainz also getting that 13th place. I think that was the maximum the Williams could do, because Williams really not looking comfortable at this track right now. Alex Albon said, you know, this is going to be our worst weekends of the season because it is a track that is so unsuited to the Williams car that we have got. And you can see that with Alex Albon dropping out in P20. Yuki Tsunoda is starting from the pit lane, is why he has dropped, though, all the way to the back of the pack. They've decided to make changes to that Red Bull car. They're doing that consistently over the last few races, aren't they? They're really trying to find something that clicks with Yuki Tsunoda and hoping that that will sort of move him up in the field a little bit, but nothing as of yet. Really disappointed in Gasly, Ocon and Hülkenberg, considering they were outdone by their teammates who have a lot less experience than them, but also their teammates are starting to really click. And I think Hülkenberg less so. I feel like Hülkenberg has delivered from that position in previous weekends, but Ocon really needs to step it up in terms of qualifying for me. Just feels really disappointing to see where he is at. But having said that, we are now perfectly lined up for the formation lap of this race. Let's see if we can line ourselves up with the live stream. Apologies, I have got a little bit of a blocked nose today, so I'll try my best not to sniffle into the microphone, but apologies if I do. Here we go then. Let's quickly just double check that everything is loaded up in the background so that we don't miss anything. One stop versus two stop strategy being discussed. A lot of the cars, especially in the top 10, starting in the medium compound tyre. Lewis Hamilton starting on the hard. Carlos Sainz on the soft. I think realising that his best opportunity to make up places is right at the start of the Grand Prix. Colapinto and Antonelli starting on the medium behind as well. Hard compound tyre for Pierre Gasly. Ocon starts on the medium. Two soft compound tyre starters in Hülkenberg and Albon at the back of the grid. And then Yuki Tsunoda starting from the pit lane on the medium compound tyre. Here we are then. Shall we get the predictions in? Final opportunity to do so as we get towards the end of the formation lap. Who is going to take the victory here at the Hungaroring? Charles Leclerc versus Oscar Piastri on the front row. Lando Norris, though, of course, not wanting to be discounted in third spot. George Russell behind. I'm sure will also want to keep himself in the mix. Although, it's one of two ways for George Russell. I feel like he's either going to be right in the mix with the front three, or it's going to be another no man's land race for George Russell, where he completely runs all by himself in fourth place for basically the entirety of the 70 laps. And we see George Russell maybe once when he pits. Oh, I've messed up the vertical stream. Give me a second. There we go. Yeah, slotted in then. 19 drivers on the grid. And here we are. 5 red lights between us and the final race from the first half of the 2025 season before the summer break. Charles Leclerc, lights out, and away we go. He's going to be under pressure straight away. Lando Norris looking straight away at Oscar Piastri and trying to get up the inside of his teammate. Piastri has to come across to try and defend from Lando Norris as George Russell tries to go around the outside. Lando Norris has lost a couple of positions there as well. Gabriel Bortoletto's done an amazing start to get ahead of Lance Stroll. Liam Lawson has also thrust himself through the field. So has Ollie Behrman. It is chaos through the first sector as everybody is still trying to shuffle into position. Leclerc and Piastri have kept their position. Lando Norris has dropped behind Fernando Alonso now as well. So Russell and Alonso through. Gabriel Bortoletto is up into 6th place. Lance Stroll has dropped down to 7th. Lawson and Verstappen still 8th and 9th place. And Behrman up into the point scoring positions with Isaac Hadjar dropping down. Lewis Hamilton has also had a really poor start down into 14th place. And Pierre Gasly and Colapinto, both of the Alpines, have fallen away to 18th and 19th. Here comes Alex Albon on Esteban Ocon, and Albon moves up into 15th place from Esteban Ocon behind. Charles Leclerc, though, with a really, really solid start. And the pace of Piastri, not quite what we expected. Piastri under pressure from George Russell rather than fighting for the victory right now. Alonso and Lando Norris behind him, 4th and 5th place. Lando Norris will be so annoyed at the fact he's dropped down a couple of positions, particularly behind an Aston Martin, because there is going to be a gap elongate behind. Alonso surely is not going to have the pace of the 3 front runners, and Lando Norris, unless he can get a move done, is going to be stuck behind a slow-moving Aston Martin throughout this first stint. Then Gabriel Bortoletto behind has managed to get himself in a really solid place between the 2 Aston Martins. So he's got that strategic advantage now where he can watch Alonso and Stroll and see what the 2 of them are doing. Lawson is up ahead of Verstappen as well. Now the highest ranked Red Bull car for the weekend. Carlos Sainz having a little battle with Isaac Hadjar as well for 11th place. And Ollie Behrman up into the point scoring places. Maybe he won't finish 11th for the 5th race in a row. A 10th place finish up for grabs for Ollie Behrman if it finishes how it is now. But we are still a long way from the end. 69 laps between us and the checkered flag here in Hungary. Here comes Max Verstappen trying to have a little look on Liam Lawson and gets the move done as well. Verstappen up the inside. Lovely move from Max Verstappen Verstappen and back up to 8th place where he started. Now Lance Stroll ahead of the 4-time world champion. Lando Norris is now starting to feel the problem behind Fernando Alonso. The gap is elongating. You can see already now Fernando Alonso 1.5 seconds adrift of George Russell in 3rd place. Lando Norris now 4 seconds off Charles Leclerc at the front of the pack. Lando Norris needs to go for it now, does go for it now. DRS wide open down towards turn 1 to the right-hand side of the track. Sparks fly from the back of the McLaren car, but he's down into turn 1 and takes 4th place from Fernando Alonso. It was going to happen sooner rather than later, and Lando Norris wanted it to happen. Charles Leclerc then pops in the fastest lap of the race so far in the clean air at the front. Getting outside of DRS range of Oscar Piastri now as well. You can see Leclerc, Piastri and Russell elongating their lead at the front a touch. And Fernando Alonso, as I said, is going to be the cork in the bottle here. Fernando Alonso, and whether the race pace of the Aston Martin can live up to the... Oh my goodness, and Max Verstappen up the inside of Lance Stroll into turns 6 and 7, and he keeps Lance Stroll behind. Lance Stroll dropping down to 8th place and Verstappen up into 7th. Verstappen does just go for those maneuvers, doesn't he? Catches out Lance Stroll, and Lance Stroll has to then give way to that position. Verstappen now right under the rear wing of Gabriel Bortoleto straight away. Lance Stroll has dropped down a couple of positions now from the starting grid. Fernando Alonso back to where he started. Here goes Charles Leclerc down towards turn 1 once again, still leading this Grand Prix. Piastri has settled into a 1.5 seconds behind Charles Leclerc now. Leclerc's Ferrari finding some pace. Maybe Oscar Piastri holding onto his tyres that little bit better, though. We've seen that before here in Hungary, where Piastri has had to adapt his tyre strategy a little bit throughout the Grand Prix. George Russell then behind in 3rd spot. Lando Norris down into 4th. Fernando Alonso is actually doing a fairly decent job of holding on to the back of Norris, but is now outside of that DRS range, and Gabriel Bortoleto is going to be underneath the rear wing of Fernando Alonso. It is once again the master and the protege side by side with one another. Of course, Fernando Alonso is the manager of Gabriel Bortoleto. They often fly to races with one another and spend a lot of time with one another on the grid also. And I mean, if there's one driver you want to learn from, it is Fernando Alonso. Now he has to contend with Max Verstappen behind as well, though. A little gaggle of 3. Bortoleto trying to get past Alonso, but Verstappen also waiting in the wings. Has to be careful here, does Gabriel Bortoleto, with 2 very experienced and 2 world champions sandwiching him into 6th place. Lance Stroll down into 8th is doing a good job at holding on to Verstappen. A little bit of a DRS train, it has to be said, behind Fernando Alonso. Every single driver, actually, behind Fernando Alonso inside of DRS range of the next. And Fernando Alonso most certainly looking like the cork in the bottle right now. Is holding up the rest of the field. It's allowing those front 4 to really escape away, but it's keeping everybody behind at bay as Gabriel Bortoleto tries to have a little look at Fernando Alonso down towards turn 2. Has a sneaky look around the outside, but isn't able to do it this time around. And here we are then. This is what I mean where I say Gabriel Bortoleto and Fernando Alonso, it's going to be this battle which really dictates what's happening behind, you know. We've got Lawson, Behrman, Hadjar, Sainz, Antonelli, Hamilton, Ocon, Albon, Hulkenberg, all within touching distance of one another. There's a little bit more of a gap to Pierre Gasly, you could say. Nearly a second or so, but Gasly's still within DRS range. And Yuki Tsunoda has also caught the back of the pack. Lovely move from Fernando Alonso. Just seeing the replay of the start there from him. And Alonso round the outside of turn 1, darted up the inside of turn 2 when it came to getting past Lando Norris. This is Nico Hulkenberg's start, and was actually very solid from Hulkenberg. Oh, Hulkenberg has been noted for a false start. That is why it was such a good start from Nico Hulkenberg. Possibly under investigation for that false start. So is that both of the Stakes Sauber cars false start. Yeah, it is. Both of the Stake Sauber cars under investigation for a false start, moving before the signal. And Pierre Gasly and Nico Hülkenberg with a track limits violation each as well. Not sure about Gabriel Bortoletto's one. I'm sure the FIA and the stewards will look into that. Just looking at the replay, doesn't feel like he gained too much of an advantage. But if he's moving, then he's moving. And it's one of those things that is sort of cut and dry, really, isn't it? If the lights go out and you're moving before them, you are going to get yourself a penalty. But Bortoletto still in this sandwich between Alonso and Verstappen. And Hadjar is hurting inside of that RB car. The gravel being flicked up on the outside of turn 12, apparently flicked up into Isaac Hadjar's hand. That is going to hurt a lot for Isaac Hadjar. And unfortunately for him, a long way to go. Sitting in 11th place right now, that is going to be agony. You know, when you just like clip something on your hand, like especially on the knuckles, imagine that is gravel that you are getting flicked up at 40, 50, 60 miles an hour into your car. That is going to be a very, very tasty bruise, I'd imagine, on Isaac Hadjar's hands. Charles Leclerc then continues on. Lando Norris has set the fastest lap of the race so far. But it's still a good gap between Leclerc and Piastri. Leclerc just cannot find... Oh, sorry, Piastri just cannot find the pace to keep with Charles Leclerc at the moment. Another 0.2 of a second lost last lap, and 2.7 seconds now the gap between Piastri and Leclerc. Lando Norris is 5.5 seconds off the lead of this Grand Prix, but then a real gap down to Fernando Alonso behind. Nico Hülkenberg deciding he's had enough of sitting inside of that traffic. Has pitted. So Hülkenberg goes early on this, trying to get maybe an undercut on a few of those cars ahead as they are being held up by Fernando Alonso. Let's keep an eye on Nico Hülkenberg's lap times then, compared to Fernando Alonso, as Bortoletto has a little look at Alonso, but not able to do it this time around. What about down into turn 1? Gabriel Bortoletto has that DRS wide open. Not able to do it this time around. And not able to make a move is Gabriel Bortoletto at that point. Maybe Bortoletto, yeah, Bortoletto's investigation has already been discounted. So did they send the wrong Stake Sauber through to the stewards possibly? Hülkenberg, though, is indeed under investigation, and they are now having a little look at it. Max Verstappen, 7th place. Holding onto the back of Bortoletto still. Let's have a little look. Hülkenberg, a 121.9. So that just goes to show how much Alonso is holding up the pack. A 123.2 from Fernando Alonso at this point, to a 121.9 from Nico Hülkenberg. So if Hülkenberg can make those tyres work, he might be in the perfect position to actually get a real jump on the cars in front. The problem that Hülkenberg is going to have is he also now has an investigation behind him. The undercut is going to be so crucial for those guys in that midfield pack by the looks of things. And Charles Leclerc, continuing on, sets another fastest lap of the race, 121.7. Charles Leclerc is looking like he has got this race signed, sealed, and delivered to the Ferrari bank at this point. Piastri then behind, 3 seconds the gap. Russell has fallen away a touch. He's now 2 seconds adrift. Lando Norris starting to turn up the heat, though, on George Russell, is within DRS range and trying to get himself back up into the 3rd place spot where he started. Oh, and there's the replay of Isaac Hadjar getting that gravel flicked up into his face. And it catches, it's the bridge of the fingers as well. You got to think how they're holding onto the steering wheel. It's like the bridge of the knuckles where he's going to catch that gravel. It's going to be so painful inside of that car. And it is a 5-second time penalty for Nico Hülkenberg. That investigation has come through. I'll just highlight that for you on the stream. 5-second time penalty for a false start, moving before the signal. So Hülkenberg might get the undercut here, but also has got a 5-second penalty when he next stops. His lap times are substantially quicker than the rest, though. Hülkenberg, again, a 121.9. Fernando Alonso, 123.1. So if Hülkenberg is going to catch up to the back of this pack fairly quickly, let's see where Alonso is. So Alonso is 13 seconds off the lead. Hülkenberg is 37. So Hülkenberg only needs to make up 4-5 seconds over the next few laps, and he'll actually might even come out ahead of Fernando Alonso once Alonso pits. That's how crazy the time differential is between Hülkenberg and Alonso right now. But Hülkenberg then also with a 5-second penalty. Does make you wonder who's going to be next to blink inside of that midfield pack, because it's clear that Hülkenberg's pace in the clean air is substantially better than what Fernando Alonso is doing right now. And Fernando Alonso has effectively just put up the wall of Aston Martin, as Fernando Alonso is often able to do. He is just making that Aston Martin car 3 times wider and 2 times taller than it ever seems to be. And Bortoleto cannot find a way past, even with him going slowly. And Charles Leclerc on the radio asking about some cuts. So possibly talking about the gear shifting or the engine. I don't know. Charles Leclerc is still leading. He's led 10 laps of this Grand Prix. It was a 2.8 gap to Piastri behind. I was looking at the gap to the back of the pack, and it's Yuki Tsunoda 27 seconds adrift. And George Russell on the radio being told to try and keep Lando behind. Lando Norris on the radio being told we need to get past Russell. So Lando Norris is going to start turning up the heat even more so, and he is now only half a second behind George Russell in this battle on lap 11 of 70 here in Hungary. Alonso trying to lap those 4 back markers in front. It does feel like that. But no, Alonso is just making a complete train at this point. I wonder what his idea is behind this, because that can't be the race pace. That can't be Fernando Alonso absolutely pushing to the limit. Surely that has to be Fernando Alonso holding the pace a touch. And therefore, I don't know. It just seems so strange that Fernando Alonso is so far off the pace. Charles Leclerc continuing on. 2.8 seconds still the gap. George Russell under pressure from Lando Norris, but Norris still can't get past at this point. And Russell just about doing enough. Does make you wonder, can Lando Norris get that McLaren car ahead of the Mercedes? Suddenly looks like a real ordeal for Lando Norris just by dropping down that position at the start of the Grand Prix. Seeing the Hülkenberg false start. Hülkenberg didn't feel anything from his side, he says, but unfortunately that 5-second penalty has been given, Nico, so don't think you're going to be able to talk yourself out of that one. Yeah, that's what I mean, Kelly. Fernando Alonso's doing something a little bit tricky here, right? He must know that maybe even with the pit stops, he hasn't got the pace to really fight for that position, so he's just slowing everyone else down to try and create some gaps, and then he's going to release himself. It's almost like a safety car restart. So Fernando Alonso is going to now launch into some pace after having held onto his tyres for 13 laps, because he is now going a lot quicker. It's a 22.9 from Fernando Alonso, and he's starting to elongate that gap a bit. Lando Norris's tracker, for some reason, has paused itself. Hopefully that will come back. There we are. Lando Norris was not at turn 3, just stationary there, but he is behind George Russell and holding on to the rear wing of the Mercedes car. He is now outside of the DRS range, though. So we are falling away, is Lando Norris. If McLaren are going to try and win this race, they need to contend with Charles Leclerc, but also they need Lando Norris ahead of George Russell. It feels like they're going to need both cars to do something slightly different, because at the moment, Charles Leclerc has got the pace to deal with the battle behind. Piastri is also 3 seconds ahead of George Russell at this point, and the gaps are starting to elongate. Fernando Alonso, though, has stepped on the gas pedal a little bit. Is going a bit quicker than he was before. And Alonso, even though he has got quite a train behind him, is increasing his pace. It's a 1:22.7 from Fernando Alonso. So maybe we're actually going to start to see some real gaps find their way out in that midfield pack. Actually, Bortoleto is now outside of DRS range of Fernando Alonso, and so is Max Verstappen outside of DRS range of Gabriel Bortoleto. So seeing those DRS, and Colapinto is the next driver in the Alpine to pit. So Colapinto comes in. Nico Hülkenberg makes his way past, actually by a considerable margin. Nico Hülkenberg is ahead. Hülkenberg is still catching up to the back of this pack fairly consistently. Sort of 2-3 tenths quicker than Fernando Alonso still every single lap. Oscar staying out of dirty air and nursing his tyres. Does feel that way. Feels like the McLaren car must have more pace inside of it, but Lando Norris has also just fallen off the back of George Russell, so maybe we are just seeing that change of conditions and possibly the slight lower temperature. It's only 21.8 degrees in Hungary this time around. It was a lot hotter yesterday for qualifying. Maybe that change has just played against the McLaren team, and the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc and the Mercedes of George Russell have just got the pace to properly contend with them. Hope that Leclerc wins. Looking comfortable at the moment. Unless, as you say, Oscar Piastri is doing this for a particular reason. Here comes Ocon and Albon. As I suspected, we're starting to see that midfield pack as Fernando Alonso has started to turn up the heat a little bit. Realise that maybe it is just an opportunity to get into the pits and back out again. Albon and Ocon then, in that order, coming out of the pits. Nico Hülkenberg is ahead of those two as well now. So, just goes to show Hülkenberg, if he can get this right, he's in a very, very solid position here. That 5-second penalty is going to hinder him a touch, and the fact that he's going to have to pit a lot earlier than the rest of the pack for that final stint. But running in the clean air, Nico Hülkenberg has been really, really solid for him. Fernando Alonso has played this game, it feels, perfectly, because Alonso's now escaping away from Gabriel Bortoleto and Max Verstappen behind as well. Alonso was a 122.7 last time around to Bortoleto 123 dead. Verstappen the same. So let's see if Fernando Alonso comes across the start-finish line here, if he is quicker than Bortoleto and Verstappen again. It's 122.7 for Alonso, 23 Z for Bortoleto, 23.1 for Max Verstappen. So Alonso creating that gap and now escaping away a little bit from the cars behind him. Fernando Alonso 12 seconds off the back of Lando Norris, though, has created a gap all by himself. Just making a train behind him, now running into it. It's a very nice tactic from Fernando Alonso and the Aston Martin team. Clearly something that they thought about and premeditated before the Grand Prix got underway, because Alonso really didn't defend from Lando Norris much at all. Maybe knew that he wasn't really in the battle with that top four. And Lando Norris struggling with the last 3 corners, says Lando Norris, and that's where he is losing time to the back of the Mercedes car, and therefore, if he's dropping outside of the DRS range, he is inside DRS once again, but it's only just, and He's not really getting close enough to the back of George Russell to cause him any kind of problems, really. George Russell is running fairly comfortably in third spot. It's just whether or not George Russell can maintain that kind of pace. Use the pace now, Oscar, is the call on the radio. So here we go then. Was it just Oscar Piastri holding on to a little bit more pace? Or was that everything that he's got? We're now about to find out, because he has been given the go-ahead as Oscar Piastri to really go for it and see what he can do. Feels like he is going to try and get the pace, the last of the pace out of his tyres now, and go for a pit stop fairly soon then, Oscar Piastri, is how I read that. And a two-stop strategy likely for Oscar Piastri. He's going to now close the gap. Was 3 seconds to Charles Leclerc. Now 2.5, 122.2 from Leclerc, 122 dead from Oscar Piastri behind. George Russell and Lando Norris. Norris now outside of DRS range of the Mercedes car. And Fernando Alonso has certainly started to step on the gas pedal. Seeing him just disappearing away now from Gabriel Bortoleto. It's a 121.7 from Fernando Alonso. And Fernando Alonso, the wily dog that he is, has done a really solid job in the first section of this race. He's perfectly positioned himself to defend that 5th place and now creates himself a gap to the cars behind. Max Verstappen decides to pit. Let's see where Verstappen is going to come out in all of this. He's going to be behind Nico Hülkenberg, but still at least ahead of Sainz, Albon, Ocon and Colapinto. Colapinto running around at the back of the pack. Let's keep an eye on Max Verstappen's pace as well, because Verstappen is going to be behind Hülkenberg and Tsunoda, but by enough of a margin that he's going to have some clean air. He's 5 seconds adrift is Verstappen. And looks like one of the McLaren cars are coming in. Is it going to be Oscar Piastri? It is Oscar Piastri. Piastri is into the pits then. So he's used up that pace. Box to overtake Leclerc, Piastri is told on the radio. So this is the undercut for Oscar Piastri. Let's see where he comes out. It's going to be a little bit of a weird spot for him to come out into, especially if Fernando Alonso gets past Oscar Piastri here. It's going to be really awkward for the Australian. I think he is. Alonso's going to be ahead. I think they're gambling on the fact that Alonso will pit before Piastri catches up to the back of him, because it's going to be a 3.5 second gap between Alonso and Piastri. Piastri comes out just ahead of Gabriel Bortoleto, so in a little bit of clean air, but has Fernando Alonso ahead of him to contend with if Fernando Alonso doesn't pit soon. So Piastri has gone for it. Russell still keeping Norris at bay. Charles Leclerc has been given the rusher up the front of the field. Let's see if Piastri can get a lap time in that will get him towards the top. Here we go, Piastri. The undercut is on. Charles Leclerc is coming around the final couple of corners. Ferrari are into the pits and Leclerc is box. So here it is then. Piastri has this opportunity to absolutely rinse those tyres. The brand new set of hard compound tyres onto Oscar Piastri's car. Charles Leclerc is in. Leclerc, a big lockup as well into the pits. He is attacking the pit entry. He is making sure that he gives every single 10th of a second. George Russell also comes into the pits. That means Lando Norris is going to lead this Hungarian Grand Prix. Here comes Charles Leclerc then. He's in and out. It's a stunning stop from Charles Leclerc and the Ferrari team. A 2-second stop inside of that Ferrari. And Oscar Piastri is going to be behind Charles Leclerc once more. They are going to be there behind Fernando Alonso as well. So Alonso now up into second place. Here comes George Russell. Russell between Stroll and Bortoleto is an awkward place for George Russell to come out. Oscar Piastri, though, has gained on Charles Leclerc, but is still a second behind him. It's going to be very tight indeed as they battle for the lead of this Grand Prix from that position. When does Lando Norris blink? Leclerc may struggle on outlap with the warm-up, says the McLaren team. So Piastri, this is your opportunity, is what I read that as. Fernando Alonso continuing to put in some fast laps as well. And Lando Norris has got a hell of a chance now. Bortoleto and Russell behind, Stroll and Lawson. And this is where it's starting to play out a little bit, as Yuki Tsunoda is now being caught by Max Verstappen, who is the fastest man out on track at the moment. Max Verstappen on those fresh, hard compound tyres is absolutely flying right now. It's just a shame that he was in so much traffic but towards the beginning of the Grand Prix. We're only now seeing Verstappen's pace, and Tsunoda surely is going to get out of the way of Max Verstappen as soon as he possibly can. Charles Leclerc is right under the rear wing of Fernando Alonso, and Alonso almost waves Charles Leclerc past. Really didn't put up too much of a fight either there. And Alonso letting Charles Leclerc past quite comfortably. Oscar Piastri is next in the queue to get past Fernando Alonso and needs to do it sooner rather than later if he's going to still keep in contention for the victory of this Grand Prix. And here we go then. Piastri closing in. Lando Norris has lost the opportunity for the undercut. Yuki Tsunoda has come into the pits to release Max Verstappen. Verstappen still behind Hülkenberg, but Hülkenberg has pitted a long time ago now at this point. Hülkenberg in 14th place has pitted ahead of him. And then everyone else, Gasly, Hamilton, Antonelli, Hadjar, Behrman, they are all yet to pit in this Grand Prix. A little gap to Lawson then in 8th place between Behrman. And here comes... Oh, and it was a really wide run for George Russell through turn 1 as he came out of the pits. That's going to cost him a little bit of time as he's battling with Lando Norris. Russell keeping Lando Norris in his sights. Norris with a 121.7. Let's have a little look at George Russell's time now that he has got past Gabriel Bortoleto. And George Russell with the fastest lap of the Grand Prix so far, as Piastri now makes a move on Fernando Alonso, who also doesn't put up too much of a fight. Kimi Antonelli comes into the pits for the Mercedes team. Lewis Hamilton, even though the Ferrari team are out there, decides against it. It's going to be another lap for Lewis Hamilton before he comes in. Charles Leclerc and Oscar Piastri then now back ahead of Fernando Alonso, and that gap between Leclerc and Piastri still back up to about 2 seconds or so. Lando Norris 12 seconds in the lead. Still yet to stop though, Lando Norris, and George Russell 18 seconds the gap. So Lando Norris would still come out fairly comfortably behind George Russell in all of this. Is Lando Norris going to go for the one stop instead then? Does he stay out on those medium compound tyres and go that little bit longer? Charles Leclerc is looking so strong in this race, though. Still catching up to the back of Lando Norris now. 121.5 from Leclerc last time around. Here comes Lando Norris with a 122 dead. Charles Leclerc around turn 14. Let's keep an eye on these lap times as they come through then. Charles Leclerc across the start-finish line, a 120.9. Piastri, a 121.1. So now down to 2 seconds behind. George Russell, a 121.2. Fernando Alonso starting to lose a little bit more time on those tyres. Feels like Fernando Alonso needs to pit at some point. He's probably looking at that gap to Ollie Behrman behind. Where's Behrman? 33 seconds off the lead is Ollie Behrman. 15 seconds off the lead is Fernando Alonso. So not quite the gap there for Fernando Alonso to pit and still come out ahead of Ollie Behrman at this point. Bortoleto, Stroll and Lawson behind, yet to pit as well. Lando Norris, either plan A, look to extend, or plan D for Lando Norris already at this point in the Grand Prix. They are opting for the fourth choice strategy for Lando Norris. I suppose having lost the position to George Russell off the start and then getting stuck behind George Russell for a considerable number of laps in that first stint has meant Lando Norris has had to veer left rather than right and zig where everybody else has zagged. And Lando Norris now continuing on to lap 24 of the Grand Prix, still on the same tyres he started. Charles Leclerc and Oscar Piastri behind on some hard compound tyres, having stopped. Here's Nico Hülkenberg down at turn 6, and there is Max Verstappen making sure that he gets that opportunity to overtake, and Verstappen has now made 3 overtakes through that middle part of the lap, up the inside of turn 6 and through turn 7, and Hülkenberg is the next driver to fall foul of it. Verstappen now at the lead of those drivers that are on the fresh tyres at the back of the pack. So Verstappen is ahead of the rest of the cars that have now pitted. He's catching up to the back of Pierre Gasly next in the Alpine car, and I'm sure won't actually be behind Gasly for very long. Goes around the outside of turn 2 here. Max Verstappen will have the inside run at turn 3, and the 4-time world champion ahead of Pierre Gasly and up into 12th spot. Verstappen now on a real tear through this midfield pack. Hamilton, Hadjar and Behrman, the next 3 above. And then it's a bit of a gap to Liam Lawson ahead. And Max Verstappen on the radio saying to the team, why on earth have you pitted me into so much traffic? I mean, he's making a good handful of the traffic, is Max Verstappen. He's doing very well indeed to scythe his way through them, but still having to deal with them is not what he'd have wanted at this point of the Grand Prix. George Russell catch up to the back of Fernando Alonso. Is Alonso going to keep George Russell behind? He is through turn 1 at least, but DRS and George Russell has to back out as Fernando Alonso covers the inside of turn 2. It's very tight indeed between Fernando Alonso and George Russell, but Russell having to sit behind Alonso for at least a little while longer. Any rain? Not at the moment, no. Doesn't look like there is any on the radar that I can see either. But you never know in Hungary. Loves a little curveball, does the Hungarian Grand Prix. Alonso still keeping Russell behind. And this is going to play into Lando Norris's hands a little, as Lando Norris is continuing to go. And Piastri being said, going to the end, difficult. So Piastri likely to have to go all the way to the end of the Grand Prix. And it was Fernando Alonso who went wide at turn 1. That was why George Russell was so close to the rear end of him. Was there a little bit of touch? Was there a contact? Might have even been a touch between Fernando Alonso and George Russell. They're going down towards turn 1 again of the duo, and George Russell leaving nothing to it this time and getting the job done on Fernando Alonso well before they even get to turn 1. George Russell now up ahead of Fernando. Fernando back down into 5th where he started this Grand Prix. But you can see he has a much nicer gap to Gabriel Bortoleto behind. 8.5 seconds now the gap between Alonso and Bortoleto. And considering Bortoleto was stuck underneath the rear wing of Fernando Alonso for so long, it's almost like Alonso was backing up the pack, giving everybody behind him dirty air to sort of ruin their tyres. So, right, I'm going to ruin all of your guys' tyres, keep my tyres nice and clean, and now I'm almost guaranteed 5th place. It's a really solid strategy from Fernando Alonso, it has to be said. Bortoleto behind in 6th spot has escaped away from Lance Stroll just a touch. 2.5 seconds the gap there. Another 2 seconds to Lawson. Behrman is then the big gap. 8 seconds behind, and a real train of cars behind Ollie Behrman at this point in the Grand Prix. We know that the Haas car is not incredibly delicate on its tyres, and a track here that is quite abrasive. Ollie Behrman is under pressure from Hadjar, Hamilton, and most notably Max Verstappen, who is on the fresher, hard compound tyres compared to the rest. Verstappen's just going to have a real problem getting past because of this DRS train that he is now in. And this is why Verstappen was really concerned about the traffic that he was pitting into. Let's see if Verstappen can actually get up behind Lewis Hamilton at all. Not even close is Max Verstappen. Verstappen's going to have to just settle into 12th place and deal with the fact that Behrman is basically ruining his race from this point, but it's not Ollie Behrman's fault. And really struggling still inside of that Red Bull car. Max Verstappen goes very wide through 1 and through turn 2. Understeer inside of that Red Bull car, not looking very comfortable at all. And it is Verstappen now likely frustrated and in a car that is not going very quickly, not having the best of times. Ooh. And Charles Leclerc, I can feel what we discussed before the race. I mean, he's probably starting to feel a little bit of degradation, possibly, or he knows that he's running a slightly lower downforce setup than the McLaren cars behind. So maybe Piastri still 2 seconds behind Oscar Piastri. Charles Leclerc is also gaining on Lando Norris pretty considerably. Of course, Lando Norris likely to just pit the once. 40 laps on a hard tyre for Lando Norris is what they are saying over the radio. Lando Norris says, yep, go for it. So Lando Norris is committing to that stop. He's going to have to do something different. Otherwise, well, yeah, to be fair, he's absolutely guaranteed to slot in behind George Russell if he doesn't go for something different. So Lando Norris absolutely going for it, that one-stop strategy, and yeah, possibly preying on a safety car. Lando's just losing time. Carlos is gaining time. Yes, but we're just sort of realizing, or McLaren are just saying, we are losing so much time, says Charles Leclerc. There's something not right inside of that Ferrari car and making him feel like he is going to lose this race. I mean, he and Piastri are doing pretty even lap times at this point, but Charles Leclerc may be already realizing that those tyres are going off, even though they're only 9 laps old, and Lando is going to go for a one-stop strategy. So Lando's going to pit somewhere in the 30s, likely lap 30 to 33, I would say, Lando Norris, and then go on the hard compound tyres for, as his team said, up to 40 laps on the hard compound tyre. Charles Leclerc, Oscar Piastri, George Russell are all going to pit again, though. Going to eke out a couple of laps. Once the lap time drops is when Lando Norris is going to come in. Say they're playing the strategy. Gasly and Hulkenberg going wheel to wheel at turn 1. Gasly in 13th, Hulkenberg in 14th. We're now watching Verstappen still stuck behind Lewis Hamilton. And having a look at Lewis Hamilton once again. And Lando Norris continuing at the front of the pack, and Charles Leclerc, oh my goodness, as Max Verstappen pushes Lewis Hamilton wide, and Hamilton has to go to the runoff. That was aggressive from Max Verstappen, to say the least. Hamilton drops down a couple of positions because of that, but then moves himself back up into 12th. Gets back onto the road before Gasly, Hulkenberg and Sainz are able to catch up with him. Ollie Behrman currently the cork in the bottle right now. Behrman really causing a headache for the midfield drivers. Ooh, and it was not... I don't think they touched the Red Bull and the Ferrari, but Verstappen and Hamilton, certainly no love lost between them. Can never rule out Ferrari pit wall screwing things up. Very true. Very true indeed. Doesn't look like it right now, though. I don't see what Charles Leclerc is so worried about, but obviously I'm not inside of the car. Charles Leclerc's pace is pretty manageable right now. He is holding on to Piastri at that kind of 1.5 to 2 second gap. George Russell is then another 8 seconds off anyway, so Charles Leclerc almost guaranteed a top 2 finish at this point, considering... depending obviously on how Lando Norris's other strategy goes. But Charles Leclerc wanting the win of this Grand Prix and desperate to do so. Hasn't won a Grand Prix yet this season, Charles Leclerc. And Piastri, turn 6, a lot more tailwind. Leclerc made the same mistake. So maybe Oscar Piastri also not overly comfortable inside of that car, as Max Verstappen now makes a move on Isaac Hadjar and gets through a lot more cleanly than he did on Lewis Hamilton, has to be said. But Verstappen now back up into the point scoring places, and Ollie Behrman, the final midfield car for him to do. Norris still leading this Grand Prix, then Charles Leclerc in second spot. Apologies. I feel like we dropped out for a second there. We are back to it. just go. I think my multi-viewer had a bit of a moment. Let me reset that. And it just sort of crashed everything else. But I think we're back. There we go. I think multi-viewer is having has dropped out because the lap times are frozen for me, and also the track map has frozen for me as well. Let me close that down and reset that for you. There we go. I think we're back, but apologies. Not anything I could do about that, unfortunately. Lando Norris has pitted. He has come out 8.5 seconds behind Charles Leclerc. So Lando Norris has pitted. He is back into 4th spot where he was. Sorry, 8.5 seconds behind George Russell. Just trying to get everything reset. I'm being as quick as I can. I apologize. But just a weird glitch. There you go. We're back. I think. Just got to click a couple of things. Bada bing, bada boom. There we go. We're moving once again. Apologies about that. Charles Leclerc is still leading this Grand Prix. Standings are indeed frozen. It will come back in a second. There we go. Beautiful. Whew. Charles Leclerc leading the race then. Oscar Piastri still that 1.5 to 2 seconds behind. George Russell in 3rd spot once more. But remember, Lando Norris is going to try and go to the end on those hard compound tyres. So Lando Norris now in a position where he does not have to pit once again. The cars in front likely to do so. Piastri, Russell, Verstappen all will want to go again. Yeah, one-stop strategy is certainly being played a lot, actually. Bortoleto still yet to have pitted. Alonso yet to have pitted. Stroll yet to have pitted. Lawson as well. Max Verstappen is the first driver to have pitted in that midfield pack. Hadjar hasn't stopped yet. Hamilton hasn't stopped yet. Does just feel like the one-stop strategy is the way to go. Max Verstappen absolutely flying, but not able to really do anything about it. Oops. Track map has broken itself in the reset as well. So yeah, Lando Norris. Let's have a little look at his gap. I feel like I've been taken out of it, but we're in there now. 34 laps completed out of 70, so still more than half the race to go. Lando Norris, 18.5 seconds adrift of Leclerc. So it's about 20 seconds to a pit stop. Leclerc would come out behind Lando Norris, but only just. Lando Norris would technically have track position right now on Charles Leclerc, Oscar Piastri, and George Russell. But he's going to have a long way to go on those tyres. Whereas Leclerc, Piastri, and Russell likely to swap onto probably a racier set of mediums towards the end of this Grand Prix. Fernando Alonso has done a dream of a job in 5th place, is continuing to run around in 5th spot as Lando Norris has just set the fastest lap of the Grand Prix, a 120.7 for Lando Norris. Fernando Alonso in 5th spot then, a 122.9 from him. Still a 7.5 second gap to Bortoleto in 6th spot behind, but still yet to have pitted. Let's see where Alonso is in comparison to sort of Verstappen though. So if Alonso pitted now, he would come out almost exactly where Max Verstappen is, and Verstappen likely to have to pit again. So it's playing perfectly for Fernando Alonso at the moment. Gabriel Bortoleto also looking really solid for a point-scoring finish, and a really solid point-scoring finish as well. Then Lance Stroll is just under pressure from Liam Lawson at the moment. They've been running around together just behind. Max Verstappen is then the next driver on the road. Hamilton still yet to have pitted. Hulkenberg is continuing on. Sainz, Albon, Ocon, Colapinto, Antonelli, they've all now pitted. Ollie Behrman has pitted now. Hadjar has pitted now. So we are going to have that one-stop versus two-stop strategy playing out because Ollie Behrman has got, feels like a bit of a gap to Yuki Tsunoda, 5 and a bit seconds, but all of those cars ahead are going to start to have problems in front, and they're all going to have to reset at some point too because they are going to have to pit once again. God's sake. No. I don't know what is wrong with the stream. It's just having an absolute nightmare in and of itself. Are we there? Are we not? Multi-viewer is having a mare right now. This is so annoying. I don't know why multi-viewer is... There's literally nothing nothing from my end that looks like it's going wrong, and then multi-viewer just has a glitchy moment and disappears on itself. The live timings have just gone blank, unfortunately. Multi-viewer acting up. Apologies, guys. It's just multi-viewer having a little bit of a weird moment, but we will get it sorted in a second. There we go. Whew. Just reset everything once again. And hopefully multi-viewer will click in and work for a little while more than it did. Here comes, oh, Lance Stroll ahead of Alex Albon in the pits as well. That's pretty substantial. George Russell being given that positive messaging. And George Russell just wants to continue on. He doesn't want compliments at this stage. He just wants to keep racing. There we go. I'll try one more time. And Lando Norris continuing on in 4th spot. There we go. Let's see if that works this time. Charles Leclerc still leading. 121.2 from Charles Leclerc as well. Lando Norris, keep the focus. Lando Norris indeed closing in on George Russell. Some very solid lap times from Lando Norris over the last few laps. A 120.9 last time around. He's now 6.5 seconds behind George Russell. Russell, of course, will pit again. So all of this does matter because Russell's just going to come that further behind Lando Norris in all of this. There we go. Is the Ferrari strategy team running multi-viewer? Maybe. Nah, the multi-viewers are very, very good to me. It's just a one-off little thing. Not sure why, but these things happen sometimes. And here we are then. Fernando Alonso continues on. Not coming in at the end of this lap. He is going so incredibly long, is Fernando Alonso. He is running 39 laps now completed on those medium compound tyres, but Fernando Alonso continuing on. Bortoleto covering him. Liam Lawson the same. So Verstappen, the first driver in that midfield pack to have pitted. Hamilton hasn't pitted yet either, by the way, but Hamilton did start on the hard compound tyre, so more reasonable for him to have gone that little bit longer. But Hulkenberg then behind, 33 laps completed on the mediums from him, so surely Hulkenberg is going to have to stop once again. Sainz is then on the hard compound tyre behind. Lance Stroll is trying to make a move on Carlos Sainz, and Lance Stroll is indeed back up ahead of Carlos Sainz, up into 11th. Ooh. Oscar Piastri on the radio is asked, would you prefer to try and get past Charles Leclerc, or would you prefer a better tyre delta to Lando? And Piastri says on the radio, if getting past Lando Norris is still possible, then that. So clear that Oscar Piastri has got his eyes on his teammate more so than the victory of the Grand Prix here. Charles Leclerc, that will be good news for him because Charles Leclerc has been not very happy at all inside of that Ferrari car today, as Fernando Alonso finally comes into the pits. Fernando Alonso, 2.9 second stop for him. Let's see where he's going to come out in all of this. Lewis Hamilton just coming around down the start finish straight. Is Hamilton going to get ahead? No. Alonso is going to be ahead of Hamilton in that pack. So Alonso just behind Max Verstappen as they run around right now. Piastri on the radio. Box to overtake this lap. Box to overtake this lap. Is Piastri going to come in? No. Charles Leclerc comes in, so Piastri stays out. Piastri has decided to go for the opposite of Leclerc, and it makes sense at this point in the Grand Prix. But Oscar Piastri's continued. That's now, he's got to have a run at it. Charles Leclerc's been forced into the pits by that strategy choice. He's going to come out behind Lando Norris, but how far behind Lando Norris is the question here. Charles Leclerc comes out in 4th spot and is 6.3 seconds behind Lando Norris. Has Lando Norris's one-stop strategy been the call here, or is Charles Leclerc going to be able to catch up to the back of the McLaren car, as Lando Norris is now dealing with getting past and lapping Franco Colapinto? Man, I don't even know. Are we back? I don't even know. Let's go with that. I think we're back. Oh dear. Here we go then. Oscar Piastri is at the top of this Grand Prix. I don't even know if we're live. I'll just talk to myself. It'll be fine. Lando Norris is in second spot, but in a really good position because Oscar Piastri has now pitted. Lando Norris is leading the Grand Prix. Charles Leclerc is now in second spot as Oscar Piastri is going to be ahead of George Russell, but is going to have some overtaking to do is Oscar Piastri if he is going to win this Grand Prix. Lando Norris continues on. 7 seconds the gap between Norris and Leclerc. There is 25 seconds a gap. 25 laps left. And an 18-second gap to George Russell in fourth spot, who is on that alternative strategy. Lando Norris is continuing on. Max Verstappen has been told to try and go to the end on those tyres, which will be one hell of a run for Max Verstappen if he is able to do so. Fernando Alonso continuing on in 6th spot. Gabriel Bortoleto behind in 7th. Stroll in 8th. They've all now pitted after doing the one-stop strategy. Lawson and Antonelli up into the point-scoring places as well at the moment. Antonelli on some very old hard compound tyres, though. Lewis Hamilton has pitted, and he's on 16th spot. And Lando Norris, let's do everything we can for blue flags. Let's be a little bit proactive with it. Lando Norris knows that he needs that gap to the cars behind. And Lando Norris, a 120.3 for him, a 120.5 for Charles Leclerc, though. So Lando Norris still looking pretty good right now. George Russell was the fastest man on the track last time around. Oscar Piastri, of course, that lap time with his pit stop involved in it too. So we'll have to wait to see what the real lap time is like from Oscar Piastri, as he's also catching the back of Franco Colapinto. There's Hülkenberg and Tsunoda to deal with in that mix as well. Hülkenberg and Tsunoda have pitted for their second time, so they're not going to shuffle out of the way in any way. Charles Leclerc is going to have to deal with them before he's able to catch up to the back of Lando Norris. It's all going to converge towards the end of this Grand Prix. And once again, we've got a Grand Prix where the two McLaren cars on separate strategies, and it feels like the strategy is going to be the reason that one or the other actually comes out on top rather than them going wheel to wheel in a race once again. Charles Leclerc, 7 seconds adrift. Oscar Piastri is 11.7 seconds behind his teammate with 24 laps to run. So Piastri is going to need almost a second a lap to close in that gap enough to then be within striking distance for enough laps to then also get the move done, you know. It's going to take a little while to get that move completed. Lando Norris has gone for 17 laps on these tyres compared to Leclerc's 7 and Piastri's 0. Now going up to 1, obviously. Piastri a 19.66. So that is going to be 0.7 of a second quicker than Lando Norris, which is in that region of where he needs to be. It needs to sort of be 0.7 to a second quicker. Hülkenberg, that 5-second penalty has been completed. That's that little tick for whoever asked that in the chat. But Norris, Leclerc, Piastri still are top 3. George Russell, 4th spot. Max Verstappen in 5th. Fernando Alonso, 6th. Bortoleto, 7th. Lance Stroll, 8th. Lawson, and then Antonelli in the final point scoring place at this moment in time. But is Antonelli going to be able to go all the way to the end on those tyres? Is going to be a tricky ask. He's already done 26 laps on them. So a considerable jump for Antonelli to complete the race on that strategy. Here comes Lando Norris once again, a 120.5. Charles Leclerc, a 120.8. And Piastri again gallops ahead, 119.7. So Piastri should be on the back of Charles Leclerc in about 4 laps' time. Charles Leclerc's also got to deal with Tsunoda and Hülkenberg, who are fighting in front of him as well. So Lando Norris has managed to get past Alex Albon and now also get past Ollie Behrman too. So Lando Norris has got 4 back markers between him and the drivers that he's battling with. And Ollie Behrman on the radio is broken. Significant damage to the back of that Haas car. That is really upsetting for Ollie Bearman, who is running a pretty solid race. All of these strategies are going to converge towards the end, aren't they? It's going to be very, very tight towards the end of this Grand Prix. Here comes Kimi Antonelli on Max Verstappen, and Verstappen comes out just ahead. Verstappen couldn't go to the end then and has had to pit once again inside of that Red Bull car. And he's now going to have to chase those ahead of him. Verstappen does come out ahead of Antonelli, but it's going to be a 5-second gap to Liam Lawson in 8th spot. So Liam Lawson now in the sights of Max Verstappen. Oscar Piastri once again quicker than Leclerc, 1.2 seconds quicker than Leclerc to be exact. So Piastri now going towards Charles Leclerc. Not giving up on the race victory at all here. And looks like Ollie Bearman has unfortunately dropped out of this, and Ollie Bearman is going to be at the back. And Fernando Alonso is continuing on in 5th spot. I just absolutely love the fact that Fernando Alonso has played that so strangely. It was such a weird tactic at the beginning of the Grand Prix. It felt a little bit off, but he's made it work absolutely perfectly as Fernando Alonso. It's going to be a lot of traffic to go through, says Lando Norris's race engineer. The one stop has very much worked for Lando Norris in this position, but Oscar Piastri has got to deal with Charles Leclerc. Charles Leclerc darts to the inside of turn 1. Oscar Piastri round the outside of turn 1, and Piastri surely is going to have enough pace to do it, and he does. Piastri is up into 2nd spot. Hülkenberg and Albon still ahead of him then, but Leclerc is done with. So now the gap between Piastri and Norris, 8.8 seconds. 20 laps to go for Piastri. That was a absolutely ridiculous move from Oscar Piastri, by the way. He braked so much later than Charles Leclerc. Charles Leclerc, who was leading this Grand Prix for so long, has now fallen away. And Charles Leclerc is now going to be pretty much destined to finish 3rd, it feels like. It's going to be a straight run between Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, but Piastri is going to need to hold on to his tyres just enough. And Ollie Bearman has retired from the Grand Prix. There he is inside of the Haas garage. There was significant damage to the rear end of that Haas car. Not sure where that came from. I don't know whether there was a little collision or maybe he bounced over one of the curbs a little bit too aggressively as Lewis Hamilton gets aggressive himself and gets past Carlos Sainz up into 12th place for Lewis Hamilton. Points certainly still on the cards for Lewis Hamilton from this position. Isaac Hadjar 6 seconds ahead of him, but on a lot longer a strategy. And Kimi Antonelli the same, another second or so ahead of Isaac Hadjar at this point. Oscar Piastri has got past Nico Hülkenberg. So now only Alex Albon between him and Norris. But Norris is catching the back of Gasly, Ocon, Sainz and Hamilton, which also might cause Norris a little bit of trouble when it comes to the lap times. Oscar Piastri, a 119.5 from him to a 120.7 from Lando last time around. It is starting to get very tasty indeed. George Russell also, is indeed catching the back of Charles Leclerc. 120.2 from Russell, a 122.1 from Charles Leclerc. Makes me wonder whether Leclerc is just kind of saving a little bit or whether he's just fallen off the pace as the Ferrari strategy has not played into his favour and the tyres are starting to struggle. But here we are then. Lando Norris has got past Pierre Gasly on that lap. But Piastri has closed the gap to 6.7 seconds. Piastri is going to catch Lando Norris at this pace. The only problem he's got is Albon and Gasly now in between them, and Esteban Ocon is also just shuffling out of the way of Lando Norris. So keep an eye also on the back markers that Norris is moving through. Lewis Hamilton feels like he'll be quick enough to not be lapped in this race. And Charles Leclerc is now very unhappy indeed inside of that Ferrari car. And it will be a miracle if we finish on the podium, says Charles Leclerc, because it is now completely undrivable. Charles Leclerc is saying on the radio, and it has to be said, George Russell is closing in. And Russell has been told on the radio a good few times this race that actually he's been doing more than enough. And George has been given a lot of praise by the Mercedes team. But Charles Leclerc is clearly annoyed at the Ferrari team and not very happy at all that he feels they have ruined his opportunity at winning this race. Here comes Oscar Piastri past Alex Albon. There's a little bit of a fight between Gasly and Ocon ahead that he's also got to contend with, but Piastri is now ahead of the Williams, and the gap is down to 5.9 seconds. So Piastri is closing in on Norris, Russell is closing in on Leclerc. All three of the podium place positions could swap throughout the rest of this Grand Prix. We've got 17 laps to go, and it is spicing up ridiculously in Hungary this weekend. Alonso comfortably 5th place, but is 38 seconds adrift of George Russell in 5th spot. It just goes to show those 4 drivers at the front, even though Leclerc is very unhappy with the pace he's got right now, have been in a completely different stratosphere to the guys behind. Gabriel Bortoleto is doing an insane job to hold on to the back of Fernando Alonso, and he's running around in 6th place. Lance Stroll continuing the strong weekend for Aston Martin in 7th. Lawson's then behind in 8th, and Max Verstappen has managed to move up into 9th spot. He is now on the back of Liam Lawson as well. DRS to Liam Lawson. He's going to go for a move in turn 2 as Max Verstappen is Lawson versus Verstappen through turn 3, and Verstappen is going to have to settle in behind Liam Lawson for now, but Verstappen has gone for a few moves through turn 6 and 7 also, so we are not done with Verstappen versus Lawson. He's right on the back of him through turn 5. Verstappen under the rear wing of Liam Lawson. Is he going to go for the move through turn 6 like he has earlier in the race? No, not this time around. Verstappen still behind Lawson in that battle. And to be the highest ranked Red Bull powered car, Isaac Hadjar also closing in on the back of Kimi Antonelli, trying to get back up into the point scoring places where he began. And we are seeing pretty much the drivers that started in the top 10 inside of the top 10. If Hadjar can get in front of Antonelli, there'll just be a few swaps. Bortoleto's got ahead of Lance Stroll. Liam Lawson at the moment is ahead of Max Verstappen. But we are almost back to where we were for the 6 drivers behind this front 4. Lando Norris leading, started the race in 4th, lost that position to George Russell at the start, and then has gone on the different strategy, that one stop for Lando Norris. Here we are then. Oscar Piastri has now dealt with Gasly and Ocon. Piastri comes across the start-finish line. It is a 5.5 second Lando Norris, 1 minute 20 seconds for Lando Norris, a 1:19.4 from Oscar Piastri. So it's 0.6 of a second quicker, 5.5 seconds the gap. And it is going to be very tight indeed as to whether Piastri can, 1, catch the back of Lando Norris, and 2, actually get past him. Needs another few really fast laps here, does Oscar Piastri. And the win is within his grasp, has to be said. It's all down to whether Piastri can put the pressure on Lando Norris and get that move done. Lando Norris just needs the time to fall away in front of him, because all of those back markers are now dealt with. It was the thing that was sort of causing a bit of friction and allowing Piastri to catch up, and then Norris to make his way away. It is now down to the 2 McLaren cars. Hamilton feels too far ahead, and Hamilton's pace is good enough to keep himself ahead of Lando Norris for the rest of the race, you would imagine, unless that Ferrari really does start to fall away. And I had a feeling it was going to be this race, you know. I've said this right at the beginning of the weekend. The fact that it's a year on from that Hungarian Grand Prix where Piastri got his first win under contentious circumstances. The McLaren rules were starting to get talked about. And Piastri, another 0.7 of a second quicker on that last lap. 4.8 seconds now the gap between Piastri and Norris. He is chunking away at that lead of Lando Norris. The Constructors' Championship in the bag for McLaren, so they're unlikely to play any role in this in terms of team strategy or any radio messages between them. It is going to be down to the two McLaren drivers to fight it out for possibly up to sort of 8 or 9 laps here if Piastri can continue to gain this much time every single lap compared to Lando Norris. Is Lando Norris holding onto his tyres a little bit? Or is Lando Norris on the absolute limit of where that McLaren car is for him right now? Piastri continuing to make up the time, though. It's down to 4.5 seconds. Lando Norris coming through the final sector. We'll keep an eye on their lap times once again as they come across the start-finish line. Such a distance now from Piastri to Leclerc. Leclerc 10 seconds adrift of Oscar Piastri. He was supposed to be in the battle for the victory here, Leclerc. It has fallen away from him. Hulkenberg and Tsunoda under investigation. Hulkenberg running in wide at the first corner. Piastri comes across the line, is still another 0.5 of a second quicker than Lando Norris. Norris has turned up the heat a little bit, but Norris still only a 119.9, a 119.4 from Piastri, continuing to chunk away at that time. Continuing to chunk away at the time also is George Russell. Charles Leclerc said on the radio he doesn't feel like he's got the pace to finish on the podium. Certainly seems to be the case as George Russell, with 13 laps left to go, is right under the rear wing of that Ferrari car. And Charles Leclerc is struggling inside of that Ferrari too. He is falling away from the front two McLaren cars in terms of their pace. It was a 121.8 from Charles Leclerc last time around. He is 0.6 of a second slower than George Russell, let alone the two McLaren cars ahead. Here we are then, 3.9 seconds, the gap to Piastri. 3.8 as it trickles down. Piastri still closing down on Lando Norris. They come across the start-finish line again. A 120.1 for Lando Norris. A 119.4 from Oscar Piastri. It's again another 0.7 of a second. He's going to just chunk away at him. Lando Norris is going to catch the back of Lewis Hamilton, though. Hamilton was doing good enough, but Antonelli and Hadjar are slowing themselves down, so that might be a bit of a problem for Lando Norris, but then also for Oscar Piastri, because they are going to have to deal with a little bit more traffic towards the end of this Grand Prix. Piastri's probably doing everything in his powers to catch Norris before Norris catches Hamilton at this point, because if Norris is able to get past Lewis Hamilton, Hadjar and Antonelli, it's just going to cause such an issue for Oscar Piastri and degrade his tyres even more so. Piastri continuing on though, and Antonelli still inside of the point scoring places. Felt like Hadjar would get past Antonelli fairly swiftly, but has not been the case, and Antonelli causing a tiny little train behind him. Max Verstappen still stuck behind Liam Lawson. Is Verstappen going to have a go at Liam Lawson this time around? They've been side by side a couple of times of Max and Lawson, and Verstappen has a look down towards turn 1 on Lawson again, but isn't able to get that move done. Verstappen still stuck in 9th place behind his old teammate for all of 2 races at the beginning of the season. Lando Norris, 119.9. Piastri not quite as quick as he was before, a 119.7 from Piastri. Is that falling away? Although Zach Brown on the radio says we're about to see a lot of excitement. So even on the McLaren pit wall, they think that their 2 drivers are going to be very close to one another come the end of the Grand Prix. Piastri made up only a couple attempts that last lap, though. Needs to be better from Oscar. 11 laps left to go. Given Lando Norris the opportunity to get that opportunity to be ahead of Oscar Piastri on strategy. Lando Norris going for the 1 stop. Still 11 laps left to go, though. And those hard compound tyres are surely going to be screaming on Lando Norris's McLaren car. 5 laps is the expected time where Piastri will be on the back of Lando Norris. That would give him 6 laps to try and have a go for the lead of this race and possibly to elongate his lead in the championship. It would be a 7-point swing. So 14 points really up for grabs here, because it's either Lando Norris gaining 7 and closing that gap, or Piastri elongating that gap by 7 points. So it is a very substantial amount of points at this point in the season, especially going into the summer break and knowing that the championship is all but in the hands of one of these 2 McLaren cars. Here we are then, Piastri, 0.6 of a second quicker. George Russell has a look at the inside of Charles Leclerc. They nearly touch, and Charles Leclerc does just enough to keep George Russell just behind him. They were having to deal with the back markers, but George Russell deciding to go for it now. Charles Leclerc kind of using the back markers in his favour over the last few laps. Esteban Ocon, the last back marker ahead of him. It is very tight indeed. Lewis Hamilton is also struggling behind Isaac Hadjar. You'd have hoped Hamilton would have been able to make a move on Isaac Hadjar, considering he's on the medium tyres, but Hamilton's still stuck. And it just goes to show, even if Piastri does catch the back of Lando Norris, we're seeing some big tyre deltas that are not able to overtake. Piastri is gonna have to really go for it behind Lando Norris. The gap now 2.3 seconds. They come across the start-finish line once again. Lando Norris at 120.1, Piastri at 119.6, so another half a second. George Russell on the radio saying that Charles Leclerc is moving under braking. That is clearly not allowed. Keep your cool, you'll get him, is the response on the radio to George Russell. Russell looking at Leclerc once again. Down the pit straight they go. Charles Leclerc peels up to the inside. George Russell commits to the inside. George Russell, oh my goodness me, it's so close between the 2 of them. George Russell, though, does get the move up the inside. Charles Leclerc can't battle this time. Charles Leclerc then tries to go down the inside into turn 2, but isn't able to get up alongside of that Mercedes car, and George Russell is up into the podium places. Charles Leclerc destined to finish in 4th now. And Charles Leclerc has done a really solid job in that Ferrari, did exceptionally well through the first couple of stints, but the quality of the McLarens has paid dividends and the Ferrari strategy has fallen away. Leclerc is just not going to be very happy at all with the Ferrari setup after doing a dream job inside of that Ferrari yesterday to get pole position. He has fallen away and down into 4th spot, Charles Leclerc. Ouch. Fernando Alonso still 5th. Gabriel Bortoleto is falling away from Alonso. That gap now 4.5 seconds. So Alonso absolutely smashing into 5th place and guaranteeing a really solid point scoring finish for the Aston Martin team. Lance Stroll behind also doing a stunning job. Similar can be said for Gabriel Bortoleto, who is sandwiched between the 2 Aston Martins, has made up a position from where he started and is looking like a 6th place finish. His best finish in Formula 1 and a brilliant way to sort of come to the end of his first half season in Formula 1, having been the Formula 2 champion last year. Just going to quickly see if I can grab the championship numbers. Lando Norris seeing the traffic in front of him. Hamilton, Hadjar, Antonelli. It's going to be a problem for Lando. He's 1.5 seconds ahead of his teammate. And it is going to be so incredibly tight between the 2 of them. Yeah, it's going to be so hard because Lando Norris is going to be so busy in trying to get past Hamilton, and then Piastri is there, and Piastri is almost in DRS range as well, and that's the thing. Can Piastri get into DRS range before Lando Norris catches up to the back of Hamilton? I said was going to be so crucial, and it's now coming into play. And Hamilton, Hadjar, Antonelli is still there. Piastri is 1.1 seconds adrift. He is going to have DRS surely down towards turn 1 next lap. So we're going to have 6 laps of Piastri with DRS to Lando Norris at this point. Lando is going to have to defend for his life for 6 laps. Oscar Piastri is going to have to go for something special here. George Russell almost guaranteed a 3rd spot at this point. Never say never in Formula 1, but George Russell running in 3rd, 21 seconds behind these 2 leaders. Charles Leclerc now 3 seconds adrift of the Mercedes car. And Charles Leclerc in 4th spot is leading a gaggle of back markers. Ocon, Hülkenberg, Sainz, Gasly, Albon all in a bit of a DRS train outside of the points from 13th down to 17th behind Charles Leclerc. Here's an onboard of Max Verstappen, still trying to make a move on Liam Lawson, but coming stuck. Oh, and Max Verstappen really unstuck into turn 1. A big bit of a understeer from Verstappen. Pierre Gasly and Hülkenberg having a fight, and Gasly actually losing out pretty substantially. That's why Gasly dropped behind Carlos Sainz too. Hamilton has moved out of the way of Norris and now Piastri too. Piastri is within DRS range. Lewis Hamilton behind the 2 McLaren cars now. 1 car down, 2 still to go for Lando Norris, but Piastri is not going to make it an easy run at those 2. Hadjar and Antonelli are going to be causing all kinds of dirty air. Is Lando Norris going to try and use them to his advantage? A little bit of DRS down the pit straight for the back markers, possibly. Could run into Lando Norris's favour for a couple of laps. Or is Antonelli and Hadjar both going to move out of the way of both of the front runners and give us a real run with those 2 at the front? This is going to get so very tight. Going to have 5 laps left to run as we come around the final sector. Norris and Piastri still behind Hadjar and Antonelli. The blue flags are going to be waving for both of them, but Antonelli and Hadjar still in the battle for the final point scoring place. Here comes Oscar Piastri then with DRS wide open behind Lando Norris. Lando Norris has not got the DRS. 5 laps to go. Piastri half a second behind his teammate. Hadjar gets out of the way of both. So now Kimi Antonelli, the only driver ahead of the 2 McLaren cars that's going to really play a part in this. Come on, Kimi, just shuffle out of the way. I know it's a 10th place. I know it's a points finish. But just let us have this battle between the 2 McLarens in clean air, would you? 0.6 of a second. Different strategies between the 2 McLarens, and they are absolutely rinsing their tyres for everything they are worth right now. Oscar Piastri is continuing on behind Lando Norris, but is closer than ever before. Is 0.58 seconds behind Lando Norris. Lando is going hell for leather behind Kimi Antonelli to try and be inside of that slipstream for Kimi. Kimi gets out of the way, though, into turn 13. So Piastri is going to have DRS. Lando Norris is not through that first part of the lap. Here we go, then. Lando Norris has led on this one-stop strategy for 36 laps. He has been running on those hard compound tyres. Piastri is closing in, though. He's not close enough this time around, but he is closer than ever before. It's 0.57 now behind his teammate. DRS open again down towards turn 2 for Piastri. There's still more than enough laps left to play out here. There's 4 laps left for Piastri and Norris to run at one another. He's not going to have any more back markers at play. The back markers have now all finally moved out of the way of Norris and Piastri. It's taken another couple of laps to do so. It's cost Piastri maybe a couple of attempts on getting past his teammate. Piastri, though, right under the rear wing of his teammate through this middle part of the lap. Gabriel Bortoleto currently winning the Driver of the Day vote as well. I feel like is a very, very nice vote for Gabriel Bortoleto. But Lando Norris and Piastri is who we're going to be keeping our eye on for the majority of these final few laps. 3 laps left to run once they come across the start-finish line. 0.7 of a second between Norris and Piastri as they come through the final sector. He has done more than half a Grand Prix on those laps, Lando Norris. Piastri, the 10-second time penalty for Pierre Gasly for causing a collision. But let's have a little look Oscar Piastri, DRS open, down towards turn 1 they go, and Piastri has a little look at Lando Norris, but not able to make a move this time around. And he actually gets a little bit out of shape as he goes around turn 1, does the Australian. Lando Norris having a little look, maybe just trying to see where his teammate is going to go for a maneuver. 3 laps left, as we say, 2 real opportunities for Piastri to go for the overtake. It's going to be the final lap of the Grand Prix, I feel like, because Piastri there lost a little bit of time through that first part of the lap, just because he was having a little look at his teammate, maybe judging that braking point. But the Papaya cars are going to be side by side with one another at some point in this Grand Prix, surely. 15 lap fresher tyres on Oscar Piastri's car. That second stop, though, the reason he is behind his teammate, he's left Charles Leclerc in his dust. George Russell has also managed to completely fly past the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc. Fernando Alonso 5th, Bortoleto 6th, Stroll 7th, Lawson versus Verstappen. Lawson seems to have the upper hand there, and Antonelli still in the final point scoring place. Here comes Oscar Piastri then, the penultimate lap of the Grand Prix. Is a long way back from Lando Norris as he comes through. Is he going to lunge down into turn 1? He is a big lockup from Oscar Piastri that nearly sees the 2 McLaren cars collide. He's got DRS down towards turn 2 as well. But he's going to have to go for it on the last lap. Is Oscar Piastri. He tried to go very late indeed. It was heart racing for the 2 McLaren drivers, and the McLaren team look on knowing that their 2 drivers are going to go hell for leather on this final lap of the Grand Prix. Lando Norris knows now maybe what Oscar Piastri is thinking. We're going to have one final opportunity for Oscar Piastri in this. He's going to get as close to the rear wing of Lando Norris as he possibly can through this first part of the lap, but it was a big lockup for Oscar Piastri. He went so deep and so late on the brakes. He was very, very close to taking his front wing off, and Lando Norris shuffling over. Oh my goodness. Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri both being given a talking to on the radio. Do it, but do it very, very neatly if possible. Here he goes then. Piastri is closer than he was before. Piastri down towards turn 1 they go once again. Piastri decides against it this time around. Lando Norris has the advantage. Through turn 1 they go. Surely Piastri then down towards turn 2 is going to have a little look up the inside of his teammate. Lando Norris covers the inside there. Piastri has to sit behind Lando for now. Piastri then through turn 3, still behind Lando Norris. Up the hill they go towards turn 4. The 2 Papaya cars fighting for the championship and the lead of this race. Lando Norris still leading from his teammate round the middle sector of the track. Lando Norris through turn 6. We have seen Max Verstappen make a couple of moves down there. Can't this time around. Piastri has to sit behind his teammate for now. Through turn 8 and turn 9 they go. Lando Norris just 5 corners away from victory here in Hungary. Lando Norris through turn 10 and 11 still has the lead. Into the final sector we come. Lando Norris is going to have the victory here from Oscar Piastri. Piastri's not going to be able to do anything through these looping corners of turn 13 and 14. It is going to be the tightest of finishes between the 2 McLarens, but a finish that goes in the favour of Lando Norris. The one-stop strategy comes to the fore, and Lando Norris takes the victory from Oscar Piastri. Piastri has to settle for second, and Team Papaya get a 1-2 once again. Piastri, though, has to settle for second behind his teammate. My goodness me, that was a very, very tight indeed between the 2 McLaren drivers. A wonderful end to the Grand Prix. George Russell comes home in 3rd spot, and a podium place for George Russell. A well-deserved podium as well. Charles Leclerc is going to come home in 4th spot. Fernando Alonso 5th. Bortoleto in 6th place. Lance Stroll 7th. Liam Lawson 8th. Max Verstappen 9th. And Kimi Antonelli in 10th place. We look at the championship. If that pops up, Oscar Piastri is still going to go into the summer break in the lead of that championship, but just 9 points the gap between the two McLaren drivers. Max Verstappen, 2 points gained. George Russell closes in 15 points now the gap between them as George Russell gets that podium place. Charles Leclerc, 12 points on the board for him. Antonelli gets a point. Fernando Alonso and Lance Stroll, the big winners for Aston Martin. You can see there Alonso up into 11th, Stroll up into 12th place. Both of them substantially now in the mix behind Esteban Ocon by just a point, but also put Aston Martin ahead of Sauber and Racing Bulls in the Constructors' Championship. Just 1 point, though, between Aston Martin and Kick Sauber in the championship, thanks to Gabriel Bortoleto getting 8 points on the board for them as well. He moves himself up into 17th place in the Drivers' Championship ahead of Sonoda and Behrman. Franco Colapinto is still the only driver yet to score points in the championship so far. What a race that was. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Apologies about a couple of difficult technical things that we had throughout the Grand Prix, but we got there in the end. We fixed our problems, and we are now going to be live for the members only to talk about this post-race. I feel like I'm going to have to sit down. My heart rate is all over the place because it is so close at the top of the championship as we go into the summer break. 40 laps on hard compound tyres for Lando Norris. The difference between him and Piastri. Piastri will be frustrated. Charles Leclerc is going to be seething at the Ferrari team, missing out on a podium place. But that is where we leave you. Thank you guys so much. As I say, if you could hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you're new as well. That'd be absolutely amazing. And I will see you in, what is it, 3 weekends time? 4 weekends time. We've got the 9th, the 16th, and the 23rd, where we will not be live on the channel, but still lots of content coming your way. And then we're back on the 30th of this month, the 30th of August, for qualifying at the Netherlands Grand Prix. Enjoy the summer break. Have a lovely time. I will see you very soon. And if you are a member of the channel, hold on. I will be live momentarily. I feel like I've got to deal with a couple of little issues, but I'll be live as soon as I possibly can.